Yeah, we're live again. This is hour 3. Thanks to the guys at Brian Dooley Racing, Airflow Research, SCAT, Vortec. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Monster, are you guys listening? How are we going to stand for 12 hours, let alone do 24 hours? Because this is just a temporary kind of practice run for when we do the big boy. We do 24 hours straight. Who's up for 24 hours straight of Richard Holdner? Apparently, I'm not. Hydration. Frosty cold beverage. But today we are FN 57 is in the house. Right now, for this hour, we're going to start off by talking about tunnel rams and do this. So the question is, well, in fact, we can get our poll up like right now, just before anyone's even here. Dude, man, I gotta learn to spell here. Do tunnel rams make more power than single plane intake manifolds? Single plane intake manifolds. Okay, so do tunnel rams make more power than single plane? So that's going to be the poll for today. Tunnel rams are, first of all, tunnel rams are awesome, and particularly when we'll go back a little bit, talk about tunnel rams. So when we're doing engine dyno testing, we're doing small blocks or big blocks, whatever, and we start thinking about intake manifolds. So for a long time, and I think probably still now, the hierarchy of intake manifolds is stock, whatever that is, dual plane, your RPM air gap kind of thing, then single plane, then tunnel ram. Then somewhere over here, you have like exotic induction systems. So multiple carburetor deals, stack injection, anything with boost, anything that's weird goes over here. In terms of power output, all of those things like an IR manifold, cross rams or stack injection, like the Hillborn setups for the sprint cars and Can-Am cars and all that stuff. Very, very cool. I put them over in another area by themselves, not to differentiate them in terms of power compared to the more normal kinds of intake manifolds. Single plane and dual plane are the most normal. Tunnel ram is less normal, but still normal-ish. And then the other weird ones, Weber manifolds, multi-carburetor deals, dual quads, cross rams, 3 deuces, all the multi-carburetor deals, and then stack injection and that kind of stuff. And then obviously EFI manifolds fit in all kinds of different configurations in all of these in both categories. I don't look at the other ones in terms of power output because that can vary greatly. A lot of times dual carb manifolds, the cross ram stuff, or tri-powers, or dual quad inline stuff or whatever. And some of them have 4 quads or 6 deuces or 8 deuces or whatever. The reason that I have them over in their own category is because they're awesome looking. Maybe, and a lot of times not necessarily functionally so or power output wise, but they're awesome because if you pop the hood and you see, hey, that's got a RPM air gap on it, we know that works good. Yeah, we get it. Dude, you're all about efficient and good average power production. It does not look as good as a dual quad cross ram or a tri-power or a quad power or a 6-tuplet or an octuplet or whatever it is. It doesn't look as cool as that. It doesn't look as cool as stack. But so we're already going off on a tangent. Let's talk about the regular intake manifolds. Dual plane is what we run on most things. Now, the dual plane, as we go up in displacement, like we go from a big block to a small block, I would say more guys opt for the single plane on a big block than they do a dual plane. The reason for that is when we do comparisons of intake manifolds, typically a single plane and a dual plane have some sort of crossover point where the dual plane makes more power down low and the single plane makes more power up top. As we go up in displacement and especially if the dual planes that we're talking about were designed for lower horsepower stockish kind of versions, and they're not designed to feed bigger motors that we're making, like with big blocks, we're making 496s and 502s and 540s or whatever. The dual plane becomes less and less functional and less of an option on those bigger motors. So more guys go to single planes, even though they lose a little bit of power down low at some point compared to a dual plane. The dual plane just doesn't have the average power production like it does on smaller motors. And again, this is all general. This is not absolute. But the question becomes, where do tunnel rams come into play? So if we look at a single plane versus a tunnel ram comparison, I've done these many times on a lot of different combinations. The tunnel ram, like if we're talking about a big block, the tunnel ram is, of the three of those, is top of the heap. They make more power than a single plane, or at least in most cases I've tested those. Again, it depends a lot on exactly what you're testing and exactly what you're testing it on. I can't say as an absolute every tunnel ram makes more power than every single plane, because there's a lot of really, really good single plane intake manifolds that make really good power. Your kind of Super Victor styles that are designed with a flange for a 4500 carburetor, designed for Dominator stuff, that have done really well. And then you have the tunnel rams, like the Wyand tunnel ram, that's just qualifies as a tunnel ram, the kind of OG one that you would have run two 660 center squirters on, or even two 450 Economasters or 600 vacuum secondaries, the Summit stuff that they used to sell back in the day. PAW sold them, and Speedway and all these guys. So that particular tunnel ram may or may not make more than a really good single plane. But in general, dual plane, single plane, and then tunnel ram. So, but the question is, why is the tunnel ram so good? And you get lots of different kinds of theories on why the tunnel ram is good. And the one of my favorite ones is this line of sight theory. Is that the port goes straight into the head. Knock my glasses off. Goes straight into the head, and so you can see the valve, and so the airflow is going straight to the valve. Is that true? Let me know in the comments what you guys think. Is that why the tunnel ram does good? Because it has a straight line of sight? I mean, if that were the case, then the straight line of sight thing, why wouldn't you just make it really big and really short? Because then it's line of sight and it's unobstructed. The reason that a tunnel ram, and again, we're using generalities, but the reason that a tunnel ram does well, and why we would pick a tunnel ram over a single plane manifold to make more power, because a lot of times that they do, and when they do, they do this for a couple of reasons. One of them, obviously, my favorite thing, is runner length. So if you look at a tunnel ram versus a single plane on a typical V8, where we have it carbureted, on a single plane, the carburetor will be mounted in the center of the manifold. That's pretty common. And because of that, and because of the port location, the carburetor is not as big as the motor is. The carburetor is smaller. It's in the center of the V8. So what you end up having, because of the way that a manifold is designed, the runners have to travel a farther distance to the outer ports, the end ports on the V8, than they do on the four middle ports. So you have a change in runner length of the design. It has to. I mean, this, because of the centrally mounted carburetor, you can't do it any other way. So you have longer runners on the outside than you do on the inside. And what happens here is, guys want to talk about line of sight or flow rate, and it's not so much that, because if you're designing the intake manifold, you can make the intake manifold, the longer runners, flow as much as the shorter runners do. That's not hard at all. You just do that by volume. You just do that by size and taper. That's not hard to do. You can make it flow the same. The flowing the same is not the thing. What's going to happen if you have short middle runners and longer outer runners, that they're going to be optimized for power production in a different RPM range, so that the four outer ones are going to want to make a different power curve. Essentially, if you separate it and think of them as four different four-cylinder or two different four-cylinder manifolds or two different four-cylinder motors, The long runner ones are going to have a different power curve than the short runner ones are. And so the combination of those things is going to be an average of those two things. And here's the thing, and we're getting a little bit more complex here, but if we take the long runner version of one of our two 4-cylinders, if we take the long runner version of that, the outer runners, and the power curve that it produces, is that power curve optimized for the RPM range that you want that motor to work in? So let's say that this is a 6,500 RPM motor. The long runner portion works really well from whatever your starting point is to 6,500 RPM. Now, if we compare that to the short runner version of that same manifold, the short runner version is definitely going to lose power down low at some point. And it could make more power up top. But if we look at the short runner version of that design, what happens if it doesn't add any power on the short runner version of our 4-cylinder motor? If it doesn't add any power till after 6,500 and loses power, let's say up to 5,500. So if you were running the motor to 7,000, that would be okay, because then you could get the other gains. But you're going to also trade off the losses of that. And that's the combination of a single plane. So if we substitute now in our tunnel ram, the nice thing about the tunnel ram is all the runners can be the same length. So let's use a simplified example. Now our tunnel ram is 8 cylinders that all have the long runner length of the longer version of our single plane manifold. So now all the cylinders are optimized for this RPM range. So you have more average power production because all of them are doing the same thing, and they're all optimized for that RPM range. That's easy to say. It's a little harder to do. And because we don't have adjustability in the manifold, we can't really make it do that. We have to choose whatever manifold is actually going to do that. But there's something to be said for having them all be the same and all making this, every cylinder making the same power and requiring the same amount of fuel and ultimately having the same timing and the same power production. That's why a tunnel ram, one of the reasons why a tunnel ram works well or can work well. The other thing that happens is, obviously, if we have a single 4-barrel on a single plane intake manifold, and we have a combination that wants and can make lots of power, are we restricting it with one carburetor? Even if that single plane manifold is a dominator and we're using a big dominator on it, are we going to get more airflow, total airflow, if we run 2 of those on a tunnel ram? So now we're flowing more air. Also, another thing to think about, when we get smaller and smaller on the amount of difference that these things make. But if we now go toward the esoteric level, if we have a tunnel ram with 2 4-barrels on it and we have 4 throttle openings, we also have 4 fuel jets. On a port injected deal like a high ram for a Holly, we can make the air fuel be what we want in every one of the cylinders with sequential injection. That's not hard. On a carburetor, that's harder to do. But the benefit of the tunnel ram with 2 4-barrels on it is that we can do corner jetting. We can stagger the jetting if we have, for whatever reason, by design, if we have one of the runners not getting as much fuel as another one, we can change the jetting for that runner, kind of. It's going to affect others too, to a lesser extent. But we can adjust the air fuel or try to optimize the air fuel with 2 carburetors. We have additional flow, but optimize fuel flow also because of the available jetting. And that's an option we don't have with a single plane. Because if we do one corner jet on a single 4-barrel on a single plane, it's at the very least going to affect probably a minimum of 2 cylinders. And it might affect more than that to a lesser extent, but it's definitely going to affect 2 cylinders. So it gives us more adjustability, more total potential airflow, and arguably optimized runner length and therefore power production in a given RPM range. That's why tunnel rams that's why I usually recommend them. The downside, obviously, is that fitment under the hood becomes difficult. Um, and if you're running 2 carburetors, it's more expensive. And a guy might argue about drivability a little bit, although the drivability on a single plane intake manifold, especially down low, is usually not great anyway. But getting 2 carburetors sized correctly for a tunnel ram and getting that to be responsive at low speed power can also be a problem. So it's not just all upside. Otherwise, everyone would be running that and not doing it. I mean, just the fact that you have a tunnel ram and then 2 4 barrels and then maybe an air cleaner or setup or something sticking out of the hood, everyone's going to go ooh and ah. They're going to love that. But seeing past that while you're driving is no picnic. If all you're doing is looking forward down a drag strip, not that bad. You just can't see off to that side from the driver's seat. All right, let's see what you guys got going on. This is hour 3 of our 12-hour marathon. Thanks again, like I said, to Brian Julie Racing, the guys from Airflow Research and SCAT and Vortec, all that good stuff. And Monster, where are you guys at? Come on. Come on. Really? Seriously? What's going on, guys? Good morning from Oregon's in the house. Tunnel ram, yes. Tunnel ram is extreme for a street car, but awesome for a race car. Just my 2 cents. And that's a common thing, is that, and for the reasons that we talked about, a tunnel ram isn't more race oriented than a single plane. In fact, I'd argue with the longer runners, it makes a lot more average power. In fact, it makes more mid-range power than a single plane does. And so therefore maybe is less racy than that, but for all the other reasons, it's more racy. I had to cut and restart my stream. It's making you talk literally at 2 times the speed. I do talk fast though sometimes. Theoretically, the shorter runner can be more horsepower. Yeah, we talked about that. At some RPM, depending on where you want the thing to happen. Arkansas is in the house. Tunnel ram mafia. There you go. Can I make a tunnel ram for the 3-cylinder Metro? Is a long runner 3-cylinder Metro manifold already a tunnel ram? Shorter runner removes the power band at higher RPM. That's right. Dual plane is great on the street. I had one on my 91 5-liter. Drove it amazingly well on the street. I agree. For a 5-liter, a dual plane, it's hard to get a single plane on a 302 to be better than a dual plane unless you're running a lot of RPM. Your Mustang went 1050s at 128. An E303, trick flow, high ports, old school 410 gears. Oh, there we go. 200 shot of nitrous. I was going to say 10s is going to be a lot on an NA thing with an E303 cam, but a 200 shot helps out a lot. My street Duran tunnel ram 468, 578 lift, 240 duration, 400 trans, 2500 stall. Just annihilate the tires at any speed. It should. That should be. Because they do make a lot of low-speed torque. They don't make quite the very low-speed torque that a dual plane does, but they just murder a single plane in the middle RPM ranges. Someday I'm going to do an SY1 Smoky Ram on our Nova. That will be cool. I definitely want to see that. Make sure you definitely show me pictures. Velocity down low with longer runners. Lazy down low with short runners, but velocity at high RPM. Yep. Settle it once for all. What would be quicker at the track? Same engine, optimized, long runner or short runner? Sorry, are you changing the whole combination of the motor so it makes power with one runner length versus the other runner length? And you'd have to see what the average power production is in the RPM range that you're using. 473 depends on the engine design. A Pontiac does better with long runner intake. Chevy does better with short runners and lots of RPM. I disagree with the notion that an engine family does better with one kind of manifold or the other. I agree with a combination doing better than one or the other, but Pontiacs or Buicks or Cadillacs are not going to like one intake better than another unless it's designed for that RPM range. The weirdest and coolest intakes I've ever seen on a Chrysler from 1963. The long ram intakes, 2 4s on each carb is next to each front fender. The Sonic Ram, that's the one that you're talking about, the big long branch manifolds that hang over the valve covers and stuff. Those are very cool, and I would love to run one of those. I did see them run one of those at West Tech, and they did it on a 500-inch version of a 440 or a 426 or a 413, something like that. But they ran that manifold and the 2 Carter carburetors, and it was cool to watch the thing. They kept having to lower the RPM of the start speed of the dyno because they kept trying to find out where peak torque was, and they found it down around 2,000 RPM. And then watching the motor run, like during the dyno pull, you could see the fuel standoff come up out of the carburetor and then go back down. It was pretty cool. Tunnel ram hanging out the hood, chopping it up gets all the attention. Yeah, it people like to see that. And same thing with the blower sticking out of the hood. I voted no on the poll because I would say either one could make more power on the right build. The blower on top of a tunnel ram, that's it. That's like the icing on the cake. That's like Freiberger's deal that he had at West Tech. My tunnel ram Pontiac definitely gets attention, I bet. 2-inch spacers and 1/2-inch 90-degree adapters I made. Carbs are up there with velocity stacks. That would be a lot. Yeah, the blower on a tunnel ram does exactly what a blower on any longer runner manifold does. The tunnel ram makes more power than a short blower manifold because the blower manifold has almost no runner length in it, and it's not optimized for power production in any of the RPM range that you're running with a blower motor. So a tunnel ram definitely adds a lot of power, and then it does that again under boost. Sonic Ram in the house. Tuning a carburetor is a lost art, much less tuning a tunnel ram. However, you should know how to tune a tunnel ram. Tunnel rams are good. Yeah, and having I can't imagine trying to do it by ear or trying to do it, reading the plugs, although that's possible. My problem with plug reading is unless a guy shuts the motor off after running at wide open throttle, otherwise you can't read what's going on with the plug. And because we've had guys try to do that at Bonneville, they do that and then they idle the thing off, and I'm like, we don't know what the plug is doing after you've done that. 2 M90s on a Chrysler Cross Ram would be cool. Yep, long runners and boost. It does what long runners and boost does, both of which are good. Getting lots of YouTube stuff. Lots of YouTube. Sonic Ram. If you have 2 turbos with the same exhaust housing, a T6 with the 132, if one is a 75 millimeter and one is an 80, will one spool quicker? If you have 2 turbos with the same exhaust housing, a T6 with the 132, if one is a 75 millimeter and one is an 80 millimeter, I don't know how you have the same exhaust housing and you're changing the size of the wheel. Isn't that going to change the distance away from the housing? Is the LT1 intake too short for the stock 350 engine? Jim from TPIS might argue with me about this, but I think that the runner length on an LT1 intake manifold is way too short for the RPM range that they're running that in. So if you see the test that I did where we put a tune port manifold on the L99 versus the stock LT1 intake manifold, you can make a lot more average torque production with a longer runner manifold than the LT1. The LT1 should allow you to rev that thing. I mean, the effective runner length is way beyond where that motor makes power at. I was at Nick's garage when he dyno tested the 413 long rams. It was amazing to see. He also had an engine with a short ram version. One made power until 3,800. The other one made power 3,000 plus RPM. I have a high volume Mellings oil pump for twin turbo. Should I use a high pressure pump instead? No, you're fine. If you put a high volume pump on, you're going to make more pressure too. That's not going to be an issue. You read that as a tunnel ram versus single parents. We're not going down that rabbit hole. Anybody here watching NHL hockey Stanley Cup playoffs? The Oilers are on fire. I haven't watched a hockey game in a long time. I'm interested in buying a turbo. Both have a T6 132. Which one will spool quicker? A 75 millimeter. The smaller turbo will spool quicker if you're talking about the turbine side. A T6 132 is going to be a pretty big hot side. Or what are you putting that on? And how much power are you trying to make? Because you're going to have to balance that out. Because there's always going to be some sort of trade-off between maximum flow, especially in terms of the hot side, and then response rate. An 80 millimeter hot side on a 132 T6 is going to be pretty big. 650 horsepower. Is it an S475? Is that what T6 you're putting on there? If you're doing 650 horsepower, you should pick the smaller one. If your pump doesn't make as much pressure as you want, you can shim the spring. That's right. High volume will definitely make more pressure. Yeah, if it's trying to flow more in the same orifice, it's at the same speed, it's gonna have higher pressure. Johnny, I bought a Summit 5711 stage 4 for my 5.3. Ooh, that's pretty big. I've been second guessing using it with a turbo. You can use it with a turbo. It's just going to be really soft. And for an 800 horsepower turbo 5.3, I would not pick that camshaft. I would pick about 5 stages smaller than that. You have a VS Racing turbo. Is it a 7875, like a Gen 2 or something like that? My 91 LX was put back to 100% stock last summer. White LX, black interior, 5-speed. It was evaluated at 28,000, 49,000 miles. Nice. Did you had it appraised or something? I ported my stock 5.3 pump and shim the spring. Unnecessary but fun. Will give you a bit more pressure too. There you go. It's always nice to take the edges off of those. I have a high volume on my Gen 1 small block and on my Elm 7. Both make 40 to 45 PS at idle and top out at 75 to 80 when they hit the relief with the supplied spring. Even on the small block, it does that? Is Vortec 5.7 and LT1 the same intake bolt pattern? If you're talking about what Vortec 5.7 are you talking about? Are you talking about the Vort? Oh, well, I guess that would be an LT1 or an LS1. I don't think that the LT1 is the same as the Vortec intake bolt pattern. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong about that. I don't think that it is. Every 5 years, the insurance asks me to update the appraisal for the insurance purposes. And who do you get to appraise it? VS Racing 80 millimeter T6 1.32 80 millimeter compressor 96 and 98. If you're wanting to make 650 horsepower, if you hadn't bought the turbo, I wouldn't buy that turbo. If you've already bought it, then you can use it But if you haven't bought the turbo, I would, for 650 horsepower, I'd pick a T4. Do you guys know of a 3-bar map sensor that's plug and play for the truck harness? Does anybody know? I know they have factory 2-bar stuff, but is there one that uses that factory plug? I'm late. Hawaii time. You're in Hawaii? What island are you on? Yeah, we're doing 12 hours today, man. 12 1-hour sessions. Are you a coffee guy? Not really. I've had Lisa has a coffee thing that she uses, and I've had it a couple of times, but I don't really like the taste of coffee, so I make mine really sweet. I'm much more a Haagen-Dazs coffee ice cream kind of coffee guy. My Olds 455, the high volume makes 30 hot at idle and tops out at 60, but the motor has some really worn out cam and main bearings. It's easy to change the connector for the Bosch 3 and 4 wire sensors. They're readily available. Yep. We have some adapters that Ish and Eric have made that just allow us to plug one into the other. It's pretty easy. I'll have to put a 2-bar sensor on the Metro. Big Island, Kona. Cool. We'll have fun. I'm curious about the appraisal also. Yeah, there probably are appraisers out there. The insurance company has a special team of appraisers that come to your home and value your car. Cool. Uh-oh. Somebody mentioned Porsche. 75. What's that going to be? Is it a 914? Is it a 911T, a 911S? 75 is not an SC yet, right? Dan might know. Going to be running 12 to 15 pounds of boost on my 5.3. Do I need a bigger map? You can run a 1-bar at 15 pounds. I mean, a 2-bar at 15 pounds. My latest Pontiac was built for boost, so I have an oil pump that can shove lots of pressure in there. 75's had a 2.7 liter engine that had lots of problems. I think the one that I had was a 72 911T. Best Porsche ever made. Mine was not that. So Dan, did you hear I figured out what the drain was on the Silverado? And that I bought a Metro? And that it's running? You really need to take it to a Porsche shop for pre-purchase inspection. Yep. Yeah, the truck was the radio. I went through the removing the fuse deal with a multimeter, and it turned out to be the fuse for the radio. I'm running a Victor Jr. 4.6 EFI manifold. What effect is changing the plenum size due to the power curve? Probably almost nothing. A running Metro. It is running. It's running well. I did a compression test. It's all perfectly even at 150. It's an XFI. The Metro is a 94 Metro XFI, the high fuel mileage one. Are you going to put the M90 on the truck again? I will after I get the truck running properly. But I have to figure out what's going on with the knock sensors. It might be just that the knock sensors are bad or old or rusty. Yeah, the XFI is the high mileage one with the 2-ring piston and the small camshaft. M90 on the Metro. Let's try the AMR and see how that does. And then the M90 is about 6 times as much blower as that thing needs. Yeah, the XFI is the high mileage one, and I even want to put taller gears in it. 271 blower, yep. 60 psi is all good. I have a knock sensor code, low voltage on the D hybrid. I think I missed a nick on the wiring harness. I'm wondering if when I put the low ram on there, if I did something to one of the wires. Can't wait to see some mileage testing on it. Yeah, I just need to be able to find fifth gear in it. What was the problem with the radio fuse on the truck? Well, when I pulled the radio fuse, I pulled the radio fuse, there was no longer any draw on the system. So I was just trying to find what the draw was, the thing that was killing the battery. Yeah, the truck is the battery was draining overnight. And so there was a draw somewhere, and we finally figured out what it was. Clean out the holes where the knock sensors screw in really good with some rubbing alcohol and a tip. Oh, Q-tips maybe? Is the A near the Q? Yeah, and Q-tips. That's right, radios. I have an Escalade that won't power the dash cluster no matter what the cluster is. Is the body module bad on that? The BCM? Body control module. That's what I'm wondering if it's, I'm wondering if this is more than just the radio, but yeah, the knock sensors on my truck are activated and it's pulling all the timing out. I have a check engine light on it that's knock sensor related. I thought it was a ground problem, but it's not. This the truck is a 2002. Throttle body, TCM, throttle pedal don't talk to each other. There's a bunch of bulletins on those. Yep. I suspected the low power on cylinder 7 was due to a wire being pinched between the head and the manifold. That it was the knock sensor wire. I don't know how the knock sensor wire would be pinched though with a manifold because it runs to the back of the manifold. Replace the knock sensors and connectors. I think that's probably what's going on. I wouldn't doubt if those things are filled up with water or oil. There's a lot of oil leak. And RTV, the plug's in place so the water doesn't leak in from the cowl area. I don't remember looking in there when I was doing the blower swap. So you're gonna put the 96 Tahoe on the Caddy chassis? Doesn't make my motor run worse. Do you have a check engine light on? Because when we put it on the dyno and Ish hooks up the HP tuners or whatever he's using, it's pulled all of the timing. Robert, how do you go about buying the camshafts? I do have camshafts for sale. $179 cams. So here, I'm going to put my email address down here. Killer B16 at AOL.gov.com. When I got knock sensor codes, my MPG tank, that's what's going on here too. I mean, under steady state cruise, I'm getting between 18 and 19, and it's done better before. So off topic, Hot Rod Monza, you can have any topic you like. I have a genuine small block Chevy. It's more for autocross and drag, but best low budget head size and rocker ratio for pump gas. I need more information. I need to know what size the motor is, what's in it now, what is the compression, what is the intake manifold, all of that stuff, what kind of power you're trying to make. The rocker ratio isn't something that I would check, that I would be concerned with. I would be concerned with the cam timing. P0327 code is mine. I need to look and see what the code is. Yeah, mine is on too. I still have access to GM electric service manuals if you need to look something up. Yeah, I think Mark did the codes, and so we have the code numbers and what they are. I just need them to get to not be there anymore. Do I have a set of heads? I don't have any small block heads. But I can get a really good deal on new heads, though. I could probably get a couple $100 off of whatever the summit price is. Small block Chevy, no idea of cam, but it lopes for performer intake. It'll brought carb shorty headers and a 76 Monza. There are lots of good heads for the small blocks. I don't know if a performer RPM, like an air gap intake, will fit under the hood of what you're trying to do. The Edelbrock VRS carburetor, excuse me, is better. Maybe the one you have is working good. Long tube headers would be better. Although I don't know if this is a race car or what the deal it is. For autocross, I probably would put a smaller RV style camshaft in that. But airflow research enforcer heads or trick flow small block heads would be good. I have a set of L31 Vortec heads. That's another option, is get heads from a wrecking yard. Tight LSA Monza, 107 to 108, lots of duration at least some 190 heads. Don't put a 240 degree duration camshaft in your autocross car. That's not a good choice. Best size turbo for a twin turbo 408, 1101 compression, 1200 horsepower. I already asked. I lost connection. I would talk to Viren maybe at VS Racing, but 366s, twin 366s probably would be good. 1200 is in between two twin GT45s and two twin GT35s. It's built, it runs, and weighs 2,400 pounds. So if it has gear in it, then you can get away with more camshaft than I was thinking, but not 240 at 50 though. Friend of mine thinks at 10.7 to 1 with aluminum heads and E85 won't work on a 671. I think you probably know that that's not accurate. What do you think a safe rev limiter is for a 250 to 300,000 mile 5.3 turbo? I'm at stock 6,000 right now. Stock valve train and cam, kind of get away with 6,500 to 7,000. I don't know why you'd want to run something that has a stock cam and a stock intake and stock heads, even with a turbo, to 7,000 RPM, because you're way on the downside of the power curve. That thing is going to make peak power at 5,500 RPM. So why are you wanting to rev it 1,500 RPM past where it's making peak power at? I've run turbos on stock 5.3s with everything stock on it, and that's where it makes peak power at. Turbo 350 trans, 342 limited slip. Yeah, maybe if you have airflow research heads and an RPM air gap, something that's like a 224, 232 camshaft in it is probably might be good for what you're doing. Because with a 3-speed trans and you're autocrossing it, you don't have as many gear options to keep the RPMs up. So you're going to have a fairly broad power curve. So that's what I would do. How's your poll doing? Do tunnel rams make more power than single plane intake manifolds? 76% saying yes. Was going to go with the AFRs. Yep. And if you're getting AFRs, if you're going to get like the enforcers or something like that, let me know here. I think I put my email address up already. Send me an email and I can probably get you a good price on those. Because I know a guy, you know. Because I know a guy. Is anybody looking for intake manifolds for an LS? The gap between first and second on the 350 is going to feel super wide for autocross. Yeah, because first gear is pretty steep on the 350, right? I'm thinking an aluminum-headed 455 Pontiac turning 273 gears in a light car would be fun for autocross. Are you just going to use one gear in that? Taylor, what kind of manifold are you looking for? Yeah, just going to run first gear. Well, you have lots of torque. Why don't you run a Thumper? Why don't you run a Power Glide and just run first gear? I would enjoy a fast, but LS6 or a Dorman one. Taylor, send me an email. I think I have something for you. My shop has them for around $600 each. Okay. What is the, let's see. Summit. Yeah, so those heads are from Summit are $624 each. Do you have any Wilson sheet metal tolerance? No, the Westech guys have one of those that Wilson ported, but that one's not mine. With 271 gear, my 455 Olds Turbo 400 first gear takes it to 70 miles an hour. Cool. Monza, I can do a fairly good bit better than that. Probably 100 off of that for each head. Power Glide needs an adapter for the 455. Okay, I didn't know if they did a BOP for the Power Glide. Doesn't care what gear is behind it between 241 and 355. Yeah. Okay, Mons, I'll check my emails. Some of the old GM cars had 241 gears to get mileage, 1,400 RPM at 70 miles an hour. That's pretty cool. What's going on here, dude? Come on. Interested in some cams for 4.6 liter. Let me know what you have going on. Just answered some quick emails while we're here. You know, I have a 1969 Olds 442 Cutlass 300 4-speed wagon for sale. Oh, that's kind of cool. Some turbo 350s and 400s had those universal cases with bolt holes everywhere. Oh, cool. I mean, didn't they have Pontiac? They have, because I have Pontiac versions of, I have turbo 400 Pontiac transmissions if anybody's looking for those. I think there are 2 of them. I'm trying to sell them for that young lady. Cadillac LaSalle 3-speed. BOP was one pattern, Chevy pattern was the other. Yeah, we have bell housings that have both of those. Thumper, you want those transmissions? I have them. There's converters there, I think, too. And she has a 4-speed Muncie conversion setup that they were going to put in a GTO. It's like a 69 GTO, I think. So that transmission is there too. Pontiac Turbo 400 should fit Buick and Olds too. What's your favorite import engine? Whatever the next one I test is the next one. I like lots and lots of different import engines that have quite a few of them. I have a RB25. I've written a number of books on Honda B and D and K series stuff. I'm doing stuff with Jimmy on the J series stuff. I love the little 1.6 twin cam Toyotas. You know, there's lots of good stuff. We emailed about it, but you never got back to me. I thought that I did. Didn't I send you information on the heads and stuff also? We're going to get rid of that. Why is that doing that? Why isn't that going away? Let's see. What was the little Mitsubishi turbo engine that looked like a 4G63 except it was a 1.6? Is that the one that was in the Mirage Turbo? I had one of those. 4G61T in the Colt. Dodge Colt, yeah. The Colt was a turbo also. But mine was the Mirage. Not to be confused with the Milage, but the Milage still races. That's right. Speed Racer reference. On an LS2 with long tube headers. I got confused about LT stuff. Long tube headers, Truck Norris cam, fast, ported heads. Would I need to do anything with ring gap if I wanted to put a Pro Charger on it? Yes. Is a tunnel ram and a high ram the same thing? A high ram is a tunnel ram. High ram is just the Holley's name for that particular intake. Actually, that style of intake, because they have that for a number of different engine families. but the high ram is Holly's name, but it is a tunnel ram. Richard, is that fascinating rhythm? This 4G63 heads would flow like crazy, really too big for a streetcar. Really? You think so? There's no such thing. Length and cross section are in play. Wouldn't it come back to runner length and how it matches the rest of the combination? If you're talking about the runner length of the tunnel ram, yeah, that's all that stuff we covered earlier. 1G, 4G, the first gen 4G63 is much larger than the second gen. They decreased the port size a ton for a more streetable car. Did it really do that? I know the other combinations have done that. I think that the 2.2 Omni head change also did that, but it makes me wonder if that really happens. Does it improve drivability? I put ring gap on NA engines. It's always a good idea because you might run nitrous on it, you might run boost on it, and it's not going to hurt you if you don't go all in on all the gap, but put some of the gap in at least. Also put a smaller turbo on. That to me would make more difference. Like making the head port smaller, to me would be the last thing that I would pick to improve like drivability. I would pick cam timing, I would pick runner length, and if on a turbo combination, I would definitely pick a smaller turbo to make the boost response better before I would pick like making the head port smaller. But I'm not an OEM engine designer with a PhD. That's right, Dan. Catch can versus trash can on the ring gap sitch. I have some LS cams obviously for sale, but I have some lifters too. I have some new lifters if people are interested. Something I thought were Ford lifters originally. I have some link bar lifters also. So let me know if are you a lifter guy? Are you interested in lifters? Please send me an email. Got like a minute and a half, 2 minutes. Bunty, what's going on? 12-hour marathon today. We are on hour 3, right? Yes. Yeah, because we're in the 11. We're in the 11 spot. It's 11:11, so everybody make a wish. I wish I had the most beautiful, wonderful wife in the world. Hey, look, I got my wish. Could I port first gen 4G63 heads over 350 CFM? I don't know. Have you tried those, Dan? I don't know what they'll go to. It's 2:11 here. That's right. But I'm in PST, Pacific Standard Time. Building a BMW E30 drift car, D-stroke 6-liter. Twin turbos. I think I want to gear it toward making torque and let turbos handle all the horsepower. What can would you suggest for best power curve? Got to tell me what RPM range you're running. And honestly, I would just make it a 6-liter. I think you'll be happier. But what RPM range do you want to run, and what intake manifold are you running? And then what turbos are you running? Bring all your questions. We got answers. They might not be accurate ones, but we got answers. Oh, you have ported those. Okay, good. That's a lot of flow then. That's enough to make up like a bajillion horsepower. 3 hours. I spent 3 hours fabbing an aerodam for my Monza. See, I just wasted everybody's 3 hours, and I'm going to keep doing it for another 9 hours now. You can keep coming back. Just turn it on and leave it on while you're doing work. So we're going to close out our poll at 78%. Tunnel rams up next. Up next, I think we need to talk about UFOs, right? I think we need to get into UFOs. And on that note, I will be back in roughly 5 minutes.